This Black History Month, WCNC Charlotte is honoring the Black voices, stories, and achievements that have made an impact and continue to make a difference in our lives and nationally. This year, there's been a focus on African Americans and the arts. The Carolinas are home to many important figures in the arts, and Charlotte itself has many spaces dedicated to sharing art with everyone. Here's Colin Mayfield and Vanessa Rufus with more on 4 of those spaces.
Near University City on Charlotte's northeast side is a place decorated with immaculate art from across the Atlantic Ocean. I got the chance to experience this place, not only bringing Africa's finest art right here to the Queen City, but offering lessons in both culture and heritage from a world away.
So I always dreamt about exposing my culture, through art.
Every stone carving, every painting, every single piece of art hanging or sitting inside Calganda's Art Gallery has come very meticulously from Africa.
I want to, share with the world what about Zimbabwe, what about showing the art.
Ganda was born and raised in Zimbabwe and came to America for the opportunities so many hold dear. But even though Cal left Africa, it never left his heart and ultimately his passion.
During the pandemic, no one was traveling. These guys weren't working. So there again, I thought I could put him to work.
The pandemic was a tough time for many, but the images that stuck with Ganda inspired him to do something that had been in his soul since he left Zimbabwe.
And I had never seen my people struggling the way that I saw when I went home at that point in time. Maybe I can support my own people, put them back to work, because tourism supports these guys the most.
On January 1st, 2021, the first container was shipped across the Atlantic, and on February 1st, this place was opened.
Paintings have 3 main countries: Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And I actually happen to know all the artists.
But the gallery is more than just a showroom. Ganda has created a series of events to host corporate partners or organizations in this beautiful space in the name of education, learning about one's culture that took a dream and made it reality.
We have content after content to share with our people.
So that site is in North Charlotte. You have to stop by. Cal is a welcoming soul, as you can see, and it's a welcoming place to be in as well.
And I think that's really neat about this year's Black History Month theme, which is about the arts. And I think art is a really good conduit to get conversations started.
Absolutely it is.
And I found a place, Colin, that is in uptown Charlotte that's all about using art to generate conversations.
Yeah.
And really, it's not just a venue where you have art, but you also actually have some history too. And it's a real way to celebrate diverse artists of all expressions, visual, music, and performance. This is Brooklyn Collective. And this is one of the last really remaining structural reminders of Charlotte's city within a city that was the predominantly Black historic Brooklyn.
At the corner of Brevard and 3rd in Uptown's 2nd Ward sits a trio of spaces dedicated to the love of art.
You can see they're coming in on the carriages, right?
And honoring the history of a neighborhood once called Brooklyn.
It was really a self-contained community. It had its own banks, its own grocery stores, its own theaters. It was bustling.
Brooklyn Collective Executive Director Monique Douglas says today, this art gallery, the neighboring Society at 229 Music Space, and the Grace Performance Art Space now sit on what was the anchor of the predominantly Black self-sustaining community.
South Brevard Street, which is what we're sitting on, was actually coined as the Black Wall Street of Charlotte during that era, those eras. And so this neighborhood was huge. It was so big, they referred to it as a city within the city.
After the 1970s, that city was no more. Historians say the discriminatory lending practice called redlining and a rezoning of the neighborhood as industrial led to its decline, the targeting for urban renewal, and the eventual razing of Brooklyn and displacement of its residents.
Many of today, what they refer to as the corridors of opportunity in our city, really the very seat of those corridors and the beginnings came from the neighborhood of Brooklyn.
Douglas says that painful history drives today's mission of using Brooklyn's lessons toward a more positive and inclusive future, taking what are 2 of the only 4 remaining Brooklyn buildings and carrying on the intentions of their former occupants, cultivating community.
The arts is such a beautiful way to bring people together to learn about cultures, for them to have meaningful discussions.
The goal is that with every stroke painted, verse sung, and melody melded, Brooklyn Collective creates a collection of new connections where before there were none.
You just don't know what the possibilities are. And so that's what we want people to think of when they come in here. They're like, this is the place where I'm gonna collide with. I don't know who I'm gonna collide with today.
And so, Colin, we talked about the ability of art, really to start conversations.
Yeah.
Usually whatever exhibition they have at the time, they'll have a set dialogue that they'll try to have a conversation about. So the exhibition that's going on right now is Bookends, holding up the middle as they should. And it's about basically showcasing legacy Black artists, also mid-career artists, and then kind of emerging artists. And the point of the dialogue is to talk about, for these fine artists, how difficult it is to have, Black artists be recognized as fine artists, despite the fine work that they're doing, right?
And if somebody wasn't highlighting this type of work, it would be lost, like so much of the history, not just the Black history, but so much American history.
Yeah, Charlotte's history.
That's that too. All right, Caitlin, that's it for us. We'll toss it back to you.
As we highlight the artists, actors, and creators that made a difference, we have to talk about the late Chadwick Boseman. The actor was born and raised in Anderson, South Carolina. He was known for several leading roles, including portrayals of real-life figures like Jackie Robinson, James Brown, and Thurgood Marshall. Well, he later picked up international fame when he was cast to play Black Panther in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Boseman was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2016 and quietly fought that battle for years before passing away in 2020. We turn now to a woman named Mary Cardwell Dawson. WCNC Charlotte's Kia Murray has more on the artists who made history right here at home.
The North Carolina native created a space for Black people in the arts back in 1941. Now her story is getting ready to be told. Here's a preview of the new exhibit that's coming to Charlotte. It was founded to send one message.
We are just as talented and just as capable of this art form as others.
A message Terry White is in a position to tell.
President and CEO of the Charlotte Museum of History.
The museum is getting ready to unveil one of its newest exhibits, naming it Open Wide the Door. It's the story of Mary Cardwell Dawson and the National Negro Opera Company. Work putting the exhibit together happens both in and outside the museum's walls. It will tell the story of Dawson's journey, founding what became the first commercially successful Black opera company in the country, giving Black artists a safe space.
Black artists of any genre weren't permitted and weren't really safe to perform in the South in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s.
Over decades, the company has been home to opera singers like Robert McFerrin Sr. and Angela Renee Simpson. But as for the exhibit honoring Dawson that will soon cover these walls, well, White says the time is now. When we asked why, she had just one more message to tell.
The classical arts have been diverse since the beginning. This isn't white people music. This isn't old people music. This is everyone's music.
Well, mark your calendars. The exhibit is set for March 26th, and it's right there at the Charlotte Museum of History. It's going to show off costumes from the era, as well as the history of Black performers dating all the way back to the 1400s. I'm Kia Murray, WCNC Charlotte.
Now let's talk about the legendary James Brown, the music icon considered the godfather of soul. He was born and raised in Barnwell, South Carolina, over 50 years in music, impacting performers and musicians across several genres, transcending the music industry with his signature stage presence, voice, and of course, his dance moves. Brown was among the first 10 people inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he was known as the hardest working man in show business and has paved the way for other hardworking men and women in the industry. Here's Sarah French and Ben Thompson to talk more about arts here in the Carolinas.
As we honor the Black voices, stories, and achievements that have made an impact and continue to make a difference, we're recognizing Corey Mitchell. He's a local theater teacher who has really turned his passion into a nonprofit, all while helping his students achieve their dreams.
So, guys, dance in your windows, too.
It's incredible. Corey's an amazing person.
He's definitely changed my life.
Corey Mitchell is a theater student's dream.
Teaching for me Every day is a new journey.
The first ever recipient of a Tony Award for Excellence in Theater Education. He taught at Northwest School of the Arts for 20 years. Some of his students include Philip Johnson Richardson of Broadway's revival of The Wiz, Tony nominee and Grammy Award-winning actress Eva Noblezada, and Mean Girls superstar Renee Rapp. But in 2021, he retired from Northwest to step out and start his nonprofit, the Theater Gap Initiative, a college prep program to help high school grads prepare for and get accepted to Bachelor of Fine Arts and Conservatory programs.
It's harder to get into a BFA musical theater program than it is to get into an Ivy League school. 8.7% of the BFA programs across the country are students of color. And so what we were trying to do is bridge that gap, that opportunity gap for students of color.
He teaches the course at Central Piedmont and even has students from California come to learn, like his student Raleigh.
It's a privilege, and I feel like if I stay here, then there are going to be doors that will open for me that I didn't have the keys to before.
Corey takes the students cross-country to national unified auditions to get into college.
It doesn't make any sense if you teach them the skills if you can't get them in front of the people.
Corey is more than just a teacher.
When I tell a young person, once you've signed up for TGI, I've got your back for life. And that's what family is, isn't it?
Corey is one of the most inspirational people I've ever met. He came into my life when I really needed him. He's there for every single one of us.
I feel like moving forward, knowing that Corey Mitchell has my back, I feel like no matter what step I take forward, with a friend like that to call up, everything's gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be all right.
Oh, yeah. You definitely want Corey Mitchell in your corner. I mean, he's such an inspiration.
I also think because the arts are severely underfunded in so many schools, especially underserved schools, that to have somebody like him advocating for some of these students in a way that they might not get anywhere else can be a complete game changer. And I know for him, they pay off to see the Renee Rapps and others go off and do so well, when I'm sure at times he probably wasn't even sure of himself or what he was doing or that he was making a difference.
For sure.
And to finally see after all this time, yes.
And for him to actually step away from Northwest and go, okay, I'm going to start this nonprofit because I have so much more to give these students with the people that I know. I'm going to start this board and I'm going to help them get into college and not just prepare them, but help them with their FAFSA forms and take them to all these different locations and present them to the people that they need to be in front of to get into college.
Yeah, fulfilling a real need out there. Well, also during this Black History Month, a Charlotte author is getting long overdue international acclaim. Her book on life in the segregated South is now on store shelves, and for her family, it's bittersweet success, 60 years in the making.
Hidden in this trunk, stories stashed away for decades.
I just felt like I couldn't throw them away or forget about them. So every time I moved, the box moved with me.
Inside, clippings, photos, and short stories written by author Diane Oliver. Her sister Cheryl kept them in storage, nearly forgotten about, until 2 years ago.
I still don't believe it yet. I'm still in that period that, how could this be?
In 2022, a British literary agent contacted the family through Facebook. She'd come across a couple of Diane's writings that appeared in newspapers back in the 1960s. The West Charlotte High School graduate wrote short stories about life in the segregated South. The book agent wondered, were there more?
At first, I was a little hesitant because I didn't know if it was a joke, to be honest.
Cheryl and her daughter Kim went through old boxes, and sure enough, they discovered never seen, never published work. The result? The new book, Neighbors and Other Stories, hitting store shelves this week. A collection of 14 of Diane's short stories. Diane grew up along this block in McCrory Heights. At the time, it was the place to live for Charlotte's prominent black families. And that influenced her writing.
She wrote about family members, friends, to the point that my mother did not want her to publish some of the stories because there could be a lot of problems.
Decades later, the work is getting international acclaim. Printed in several languages like German, critics comparing her to greats like Toni Morrison, and even getting a shout out in this week's People magazine. But its success, Diane would never see herself. She died in 1966 at the age of 22 in a motorcycle crash days before getting her master's.
All my life, I've just heard stories about her. And as a child, I've always asked, what was she like?
Her stories now offer a unique insight into the civil rights movement, and for family, a bittersweet time capsule. Her delayed success, Cheryl says, was anticipated by their mother, who first compiled all those writings after Diane died.
Her whole life was in that box. My mother did not throw anything. She must have felt like she was going to be famous.
That fame finally came, nearly 60 years after a young author was taken too soon.
It's so surreal and so wonderful at the same time.
You can't but help be happy and excited for that family to have something like this happen 60 years after they grappled with the death of her. And after we did the interview with them, they went up to New York City. The publisher had them up for a big, fancy, release party.
Yeah.
And I know for them, the whole experience has been so special and interesting. Also, as we said when the story first aired, a testament to keeping some of those things in trunks.
That's what I was just going to say. My mother right now is having to clean her mother's house after her passing. And it's so easy to say, I should just throw all these papers away or whatever. But that is such a testament. At least get a box and store,
those, her writings were done in her handwriting, actually.
Amazing.
And sat in boxes for decades. They then took them and started transcribing them, typing them out. And that's when they started realizing, hey, we actually might have something here.
That's amazing. Love that story.
All right, Kaylin?
Well, when you think of the word cowboy, you may think of John Wayne, but there are people who came before who are often overlooked. Austin Walker explains how a Charlotte group is continuing to educate people while serving the community.
History shows you the first Cowboys were actually black. And here in Charlotte, the Charlotte Cowboys are continuing on the legacy of thousands who came before them.
All animals are different.
Saddling up for a ride.
I definitely learned about myself.
Anthony McCall reflects.
You see yourself in horses.
Thinking about what all he's learned.
Whoa.
And one piece of information.
It's common for people to have stolen other people's work.
Sticks out above the rest.
They'll see us downtown on the horses and think, oh, black people ride horses. We're like, we were the originals.
According to the Library of Congress, black men were among the first cowboys in the U.S. They roped, branded, and saddled up for cattle drives, many gaining fame and making their mark.
No, I learned that from Mr. Charles right here.
The Charlotte Cowboys, a nonprofit, continuing a legacy some don't even know about.
I think it's just one of those hidden gems about the city a lot of people should learn.
Greg Lockhart, an instructor with the Charlotte Cowboys, says some history is overlooked.
As black folks, just in our culture, a lot of things were taken from us over time.
So while even though they learn something new every day, they have to teach.
You got to know where you come from and what your people have accomplished.
When they aren't taking a ride through the streets of Uptown, they are giving back. Teaching kids how to ride, learning how to gain confidence while controlling an animal.
Just for them to even have a safe space, knowing that they can be around these large animals.
We live for the next ride and the next time to go out on our horses.
McCall swinging his leg over, ready for another day on the saddle, wondering what else he'll learn about himself.
A lot of the best cowboys I know and the best trainers I know are black.
While ready to teach about those who came before. In Charlotte.
History. I think all history is important.
Austin Walker, WCNC Charlotte.
Well, let's talk now about Nina Simone, a native of Tryon, North Carolina. Simone's talent truly had no bounds. Her work as a singer, songwriter, and pianist spanned across several different music genres. She used her creativity and music to illustrate her fierce activism for civil rights, putting a spotlight to the societal impositions women of color have faced. Simone passed on in 2003, but her legacy in music live on to this day. Looking back at the past while also looking toward the future. That's what Jane Monreal and Nick Sturdivant have done, showing Charlotte's former social scene and the local artists now in her prime.
Just off the Brookshire Freeway on Beatties Ford Road is this building that was once the social scene for Charlotte's black community. Now it's an abandoned building. But if the walls of Excelsior Club could talk, there would be plenty of stories to tell.
The seed for such a dream took place years earlier in 1939 when McKee was working as a head mail clerk. Also tending bar at various restaurants around the Queen City, it is that side hustle that helped McKee hatch the idea to open Charlotte's first nightclub for African Americans.
The demographic back then in the black experience was if you were a teacher or a principal or a preacher or a supervisor even on your job, even if it may have been in industry somewhere, you were considered rich, high end, and people like that couldn't go to a country club.
Ken Kuntz explaining why McKee started Excelsior Club in the first place. According to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Historical Landmarks Commission, by the 50s and 60s, it became a favorite watering hole for movers and shakers, from politicians to musicians, including Nat King Cole.
A concerted effort.
Kuntz, prior to becoming one of the club's illustrious owners in the 1980s, co-founded a TGIF event at the Excelsior, namely a $5 cover charge for unlimited drinks.
We had a great run with it, and we endeared ourselves to Jimmy, and we told him, if you ever get to a point where you really want to sell it, we'd love to have it. So that's how it initially came to be.
These days, the abandoned building sits behind a chain link fence, secured by a heavy-duty lock and chain, the front door boarded up, a shell of its former self. Kuntz sold his share of the club in 1987, but not before seeing the Excelsior deemed a historical landmark.
My purpose was, when I bought it and told Jimmy, who was a close personal family friend before I bought it, I said, Jimmy, this needs to be preserved because Charlotte has no appreciation for history and certainly no appreciation for black history.
When it comes to Excelsior Club's modern day legacy, people still talk about Dirty 30 Thursday.
What we did with Dirty was, again, what you see here stays here. And you couldn't take any pictures at Dirty because all of us are legitimate taxpayers. During the day, at night, you smack somebody like this.
For 15 years, every Thursday night until 2016, B. Thompson, already a local radio personality, helped spearhead what built up to be one of the club's most successful concepts.
For me, it was fun, and it allowed the side of my personality to come out that could not come out on air. So my thing in telling people also what goes on at Dirty 30 Thursday stays at Dirty 30 Thursday. And that became the line that people would say to me out in the street, like, hey, how you doing? Hey, Dirty, what go on at Dirty? You know the rules. And they'll say, yep, I know the rules. So it was not only a friend thing, but a familial thing.
This is how we roll at Dirty.
Thompson remembering groups of regulars hitting the dance floor at Excelsior every week to DJs playing old school jams from the 70s to the 90s.
The place that the Excelsior and that Dirty had for a lot of people. I know of 6 marriages that came out of Dirty over the course of that 15 years that I did. 6 marriages.
Looked like it was so much fun.
What goes on at Dirty 30 Thursdays?
Stays at Dirty 30 Thursdays. Like the Vegas of old OG style. But I like that they have that place to go to, and they really, a lot of folks now are coming back and saying, I miss Dirty 30. I miss the Excelsior Club. I wanna see it come back, and hopefully there will be some way, if there's a will, there's a way to bring that club back, but it's dealing with some issues right now.
And I love how she said she was able to be herself and show her personality, her full personality. So shout out to them. Dirty 30 Thursdays.
Catchy, isn't it?
Well, fresh off her show stealing turn at the Grammy, and we're rolling. Don't get me started. I love to say, I'm not gonna. You just gotta.
You can continue.
And we're rolling, rolling. Well, okay, let me get to it. Let me get to the story. North Carolina native Fantasia, if you haven't already known, starred in the critically acclaimed movie, The Color Purple. This opportunity isn't just a role of a lifetime, but a journey towards her own healing. December 23rd, the stars were out.
Like I said, I'm proud of her, man. She deserves it. All the flowers that she's getting, and God just keep blessing her, man.
You know, winning the competition to hear, this is another one of those big milestones. You know what I'm saying?
A big night for singer and actress Fantasia Barrino. She hosted a screening for family and friends in Charlotte for her new movie, The Color Purple.
So it means more to me than to be in LA, Miami, Atlanta, New York. We right here in the Queen City.
All smiles along with a few tears of joy.
To bring this back home, to share this with like all of my friends and my family, it means the world to me. I'm trying not to cry my makeup off.
Fantasia's journey to the big screen starts about an hour and a half away in High Point, North Carolina. Her musical roots begin in the church that was led by her grandmother and mother. But at 14, she dropped out of high school, and at 17 became pregnant. 2 years later, struggling to make ends meet, she auditioned for American Idol, winning it all in 2004. Not long after winning, Fantasia released her debut album, Free Yourself, and the New York Times best-selling memoir, Life is Not a Fairy Tale.
I think, that God gifted her, that he put a call on her life to be able to bless others through the gift that he has given her.
But things were far from rosy. In 2007, she played Celie on the Broadway production of The Color Purple. In an interview with Variety in November, she said, quote, "My life was in shambles, the role forcing her to deal with her own trauma, similar to Celie's, dealing with a history of violence and sexual abuse in her personal life." She told Variety, quote, "I could let go of every man that's put his hands on me. I freed myself from that." 16 years later, the wife, mother, and Grammy Award-winning singer is playing the character on the big screen, hoping to inspire.
Ooh, the healing that takes place. In the end, Celie forgives Mr. Yes. And when you watch the movie, you'll see why I said that. Awesome. I want people to leave this movie and call people they ain't talked to in a long time. Life is short.
And for Fantasia, she says, at this point, life is good.
And I want them to see that, baby, you can be whatever you want to be.
I'm so proud of Fantasia. I remember it's been 20 years since her American Idol run.
How long?
And I remember how, we were just in front of the TV screens. she grew up maybe 5 minutes away from where I grew up in High Point.
So to represent your hometown.
And to see her right there.
Fantastic. I just watched The Color Purple, and no surprise, she was amazing to share her skills there on the silver screen.
Can't wait for the future for Fantasia. All right, Caitlin, back to you.
In Uptown, Charlotte's original high school for Black students may soon see new life more than 50 years after it was demolished. CMS looking to rebuild Second Ward High with a medical and technology focus. Well, it's expected to be at the same location where it once stood before being torn down in the 70s. And while former students say they're hopeful about the idea of a new school, they're worried that it could be another broken promise. Being in the Second Ward High School gym brings back many memories for Mecklenburg County Commissioner Arthur Griffin.
Second Ward was the life of the community. This was Black Valentine in terms of having all the resources you can imagine.
The school opened in 1923 as the only high school for Black students in Charlotte, surrounded by resources supporting the Black community as a neighborhood known as Brooklyn.
Your dentists were here, your doctors were here. This is where you would go.
Today, the gym is all that's left of the school after it was torn down in 1970, and the Brooklyn neighborhood was raised in Charlotte's first wave of urban renewal, which displaced thousands of Black Charlotteans.
I graduated in 1969, the last class. All of a sudden, we was going to school, and they tearing down the school while we going. And they promised us they was going to build another one. But as you know, never happened.
That hope may soon become reality after voters approve CMS's $2.5 billion bond, with a portion of the money going toward a new Second Ward Medical and Technology High School next to the gym.
We are absolutely committed to this project.
Though in the early stages, CMS Facilities Management Director Dennis Lacaria says the new magnet school is expected to accommodate around 2,000 students.
Multi-story, something that is reflective of the area directly around it, and really hopefully some very exciting architecture too.
For Griffin and many of the other graduates who still gather to keep the history of the school and community alive, the chance to see Second Ward recreated brings hope.
Thrilling for that to happen.
At least we'll have something with the Second Ward names, and hopefully it'll happen. It's been a long time coming.
Thanks for joining us for this Black History Month special. I'm Kaylin Hackwood.